Stan, as part of The Fix's continuing conversation on gender-based violence and raising awareness about this issue in our society, we are going to be discussing the topic of misogyny today. My name is Mamohau Seseane, and on my left, I'm joined by Sascha Wharton-Hood, and the lady in blue over here, Zaylia Vivianne. And of course, Pabi Mbedzi, also known as 100% that girl. When we talk about the various forms of gender-based violence, I know in just even the national conversation, we often talk about physical abuse, sexual abuse, mental abuse as well. And I think one that we definitely don't talk about enough and just permeates various forms of gender-based violence is financial and economic abuse as well. So I'd like to open the conversation by just diving into that. And I remember reading, the Sustainable Development Goals, the 2030 SDGs. One of them is to achieve equality for women, gender equality. And without women having access to economic resources, let's be honest, that's just never going to happen, right? So we need to talk about financial and economic abuse. And there is a great South African activist, Felicity Guest, and she is just driving this conversation on various forms. She's looking at the court system, she's going to government, trying to raise awareness about financial abuse. And I like the way she describes it. So she says that it's a way to coerce, manipulate, or control women. That's what the abuser does, and using money as a tool to do that. And it can manifest in different forms, right? Whether it be before, during, or after a relationship, where women are prevented from earning an income, or you're not an equal player within your household, and having, just control over the finances. It's where women are not able to go and work. A lot of women are actually stopped from working and being able to gain financial independence so that they can become completely dependent on this abusive partner. And I think what raises more alarm bells is that it goes hand in hand with so many other kinds of gender-based violence and abuse. And often, because of this financial and economic abuse, a lot of women then find it extremely difficult to flee violence and to flee abusive relationships. And even after the fact, when they do manage to do so, to be able to, establish safety for yourself and gain independence without access to economic resources, that makes it extremely difficult to do. And I think it's such an insidious and very evil, tool in which to do so, to subdue women, to make us, be subjugated and to have control over us. We are just not equal players within our relationships, within marriages as well. There's women who are in marriages where this plays out as well. And I think what we see in South Africa is also the targeting of young girls.
Yeah, absolutely.
Through, especially young girls who are economically disenfranchised, who are poor, born into poverty. Obviously, the prospect of having some kind of access to finances would be appealing. And I think especially, this also plays out in various forms. So it's during that, it's then during the relationship, it's after a relationship as well, and within a marriage.
I mean, I think financial abuse specifically is one that you said is silent but very prevalent because it doesn't leave bruises.
Yes.
Yeah, it doesn't leave scars on your body. And when you leave the house, nobody knows where you're coming from. Nobody knows how much is in your bank account, who has control over the card, who's paying the rent, who's paying for your kids' education. These are all the silent instigators of gender-based violence that are deeply rooted in misogyny because they're not visible. And that's why conversations like these are so incredibly important to highlight the realities of women in South Africa. Particularly when we're talking about economic disenfranchisement, it's incredibly important to recognize that women are the most vulnerable in South Africa, specifically when you're looking at the racial demographics of South Africa. When we're talking about genital mutilation and the relationship between culture and gender-based violence and economic disenfranchisement and gender-based violence. When we look at the statistics of the breakdown of our South African population, 80.9% of the South African population is comprised of Black individuals. And of that, over 52% of those Black individuals are women.
Sure.
So
we're the majority.
So women are the majority. And within that group of Black women, women under the age of 16 make up the majority. So South Africa is young, Black, and female.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, in the system that we have in South Africa, and with our long-standing history of colonialism and apartheid, Black is synonymous with poor.
Yeah.
So when you're breaking down these cycles that perpetuate gender-based violence, and you're looking at who is most affected, it is young Black women. So when you start to discuss the role of economics and employment and financial independence, you need to look at the numbers.
Yeah.
Over 47% of Black women between the ages of 15 and 64 are economically inactive. So this is the largest portion of our population is not earning money. They don't have any ties to freedom. They have no upskilling abilities, and they have no employable opportunities. So when you're in these circumstances of gender-based violence in low-income households, young women are specifically in marriages, as we're talking about young women in forced marriages, are working as domestic workers, as cleaners, and in other very unstable job environments. So the financial rug can be pulled out from underneath them very, very quickly.
You can't even save as a woman. You can't become financially independent.
Exactly. And specifically because the majority of the young women haven't gone through education systems that give them financial literacy and mathematical skills. So what happens if you don't have a job and if you don't have income? You go back to your household where your husband or your boyfriend or your father is dictating your life by their own purse strings. You look back in the statistics of gender-based violence, and it's disproportionately affecting women under the age of 17, between the ages of 8 and 17. And these are the women who aren't able to go to school because their fathers or partners or members of their family, even though they can afford it, they won't allow them to go to school, which will give them the opportunity to be employable in the future. So the lack of education opportunities for young women creates a self-perpetuating cycle of gender-based violence, because you are taught that education isn't a right for you, and a lack of education results in a lack of financial freedom and financial independence, especially in households where women have children or multiple children that they need to provide for. The father or the paternal figure in the household is generally the one who pays the school fees, pays the rent, pays for groceries, puts petrol in the car if there is one. So they very, very strongly dictate the livelihoods of these women. So when a woman becomes economically disenfranchised and are unable to get a job, or they lose their job, or blow through their whatever little savings that they have left, they fall back into the hands of their abuser. And I think the best way that we can describe gender-based violence and the relationship between it and the Black South African woman is quoted by Cyril Ramaphosa, where he said that the face of poverty is the face of the African woman, which totally encapsulates how financial insecurity in women is just kind of the epitome of the South African struggle in gender-based violence right now.
And it makes it even more difficult for women to then leave situations of abuse.
Absolutely.